everybody. I am Beth Rosenbarger. I'm the Assistant Director of the Planning and Transportation Department here at the City of Bloomington. We want to thank you for coming out tonight, for coming to share your time and ideas with us at the College and Walnut Corridor Study public meeting. You are going to hear from Tool Design Group consultants and Cindy Zerger, who is going to lead the presentation tonight. So, and she'll give you an overview of what to expect. So thanks so much. Yeah, and then I'll hop in for those parts you want to hop in on. Okay, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Really great to see everyone out here. Hopefully it'll be a little bit of fun tonight. We're going to go through a presentation. Some of it's going to be educational, I hope, for you. And then you're going to educate us because you're going to tell us what you want in your community. We're here to listen and hear from you. We, of course, have been here for a couple days, or got here yesterday, walked the whole corridor, both of the corridors. So that was kind of fun, and we'll share a bit of our observations. So hopefully I can get this to move the right direction. Great. So here's a little bit of our agenda tonight. We've gone through a little bit of our welcome. We'll do a little bit more of that here and give you a sense of the project timeline, what we're here to do this week. We'll talk a little bit about the corridor study overview. What is the study focus, the goals, opportunities, and challenges. Then we're going to go into a little what we call food for thought, things to think about before we jump into our workshop and hearing from you. And then we're going to ask some pretty general questions, and we're looking for you to give us feedback as specific as you want. We're going to keep it pretty open-ended to hear from you about the corridors and how you want to see them function. And we'll also do a report out, so we're going to convene at small groups or tables, and we'll go through what that's going to look like in a little bit. So as Beth mentioned, we're Tool Design. I'm Urban Design Director for Tool, and with me I have Jazz Warren out of our Minneapolis office. She's an urban designer, and Melissa Fickle, an engineer from our team based in Michigan. So we come together for projects like this and thinking about how streets function in communities like yours. Streets are arguably the largest part of our public realm in downtown areas, and how do we want that to function as a community asset is part of the way we think about it, and making it an enjoyable space for all. And with us, not tonight, but a part of the team is HERD engagement specialists. They were here today during some of the stakeholder conversations, and you'll see them at other times during the project as well. So here's a general sense of the corridor timeline. We are here, you can see that in the big arrow, saying we're at public meetings and engagement week. So before that, we did a little bit of a data collection, existing conditions analysis. We'll share a little bit of that information. What we hear from this week is gonna lead to what we call design concept alternatives. We're gonna come up with a few different options, and then we're gonna evaluate them. There's not a prescribed idea at this point in time. That is for you to tell us and the stakeholders who are here today and will be here tomorrow to really come up with some options. There's lots of options we could think about for College and Walnut. We'll look at preferred concept and go through an assessment of that. We'll evaluate it based on community values is often the way we frame it, and Beth will speak a little bit more about that and how we'll be doing that. And then we'll come up with a draft and final corridor study. And that's, again, this project came out of the transportation plan to study College and Walnut a little bit further. So that's what we're here to do. You can see there's public engagement, and I'm not going to highlight a lot of that, but just know that it's a very involved public process, and we want to encourage you to stay involved throughout the process. So, of course, we're here again in that engagement week. Lots more opportunities through other public meetings and certainly the online survey. So here's the week. Again, we arrived yesterday. Well, some of us arrived on Sunday, and we've had an opportunity to enjoy Bloomington, get to know some of the streets, walked, biked the streets as well, but certainly drove as well. And we actually walked the entire length of both College and Walnut yesterday, so it was a really great way to see activity on the streets. So we're here at June. We had some stakeholder interviews earlier today, and we had what we call open studio, and that's an opportunity for folks to come in and just drop in and hear what we're here, give us their input and see what we're working on. So I want to highlight everything that's highlighted in blue is a public opportunity to come in and give us input this week. So that's, again, we're at Tuesday, we're at the public workshop. Tomorrow we have another open studio session between 9 and 12 and 1 and 4. There will also be stakeholder meetings going on, but you can join a table if there's more input you want to give, or if people who are neighbors, friends, colleagues that aren't here tonight and want to come in and give input, tomorrow is a great opportunity for that. On Thursday, we will be furiously coming up with design ideas, and then that evening, we'll do another public workshop, same time, same place, 6 to 7:30, and we'll sort of share with you what we call starter ideas. So things we heard from you, we'll listen to what you have to say, come up with some options that could happen on College and Walnut, and present those back to you, and you'll have another opportunity to provide input at that time. All right, I'm going to pass it back over to Beth.
Hey, thanks. So I think some folks here are probably pretty familiar with the corridor study so far, and some people, I'm not sure, it might be brand new to you. So the corridor study that we're talking about right now is College Avenue and Walnut Street, starting on the northern end at the bypass and the southern end at Allen Street. That's 2.25 miles on each street. It's about 4.5 miles of street that we're talking about. With this whole corridor study, the first part is analyzing existing conditions. So how many motor vehicles per day are using each street? Where and how many crashes have we seen along this corridor? Where do businesses tend to be successful and maybe less successful along these streets? Where do people get very frustrated by deliveries on a regular basis? And where do we see loading and unloading happening a lot? So those, and how parking on the street, there are different places that have parking and that don't. How much is that parking utilized? Different things. So basically, like, what is happening in that space right now? And where we are now, too, is to say this corridor study was identified in the transportation plan as a project or as a study we need to do as a community. The plan, and we're going to talk about it, identified 6 key goals for the corridor study. There is room to add more goals as a community. So if there's something that we look at that list and you think, hey, we really forgot about climate action, or we really forgot about how much we want to have trees in our community, or we really forgot about something, share it, and we want to make sure there's space to add goals into what we want to see in these streets in our community. After identifying and making sure we've got all the right goals, as a community, we will develop design concepts in conjunction with the consultants. And that includes a do-nothing option. So this can be pretty confusing as a process, because right now we are saying we think these streets are worth studying. We think there are issues happening here. We can share those issues. But as a community, we could decide to do nothing. We could decide to just improve the sidewalks. We could decide to do a lot of things. So there's a whole spectrum and range of possibilities there. So once those range of possibilities are developed, we move into evaluating the conceptual designs based on our community goals. So as we look at those, which of these design options helps us encourage downtown businesses the most? Which of these helps us improve pedestrian safety? Which of these helps us address some of the frustrations with deliveries and loading? So that's how we want to evaluate them as a community. And then, let's say we do decide on one as a community, then we want to move forward with a design and go through a formal adoption process to amend it into the transportation plan. Okay. Even on the big screen, those are a little bit small. I'll do a summary. So in the transportation plan, it identified 6 goals of the corridor study. And briefly, it's to provide pedestrians with safe passage along the corridors, provide bicyclists with safe protected bicycle paths along the corridors, provide transit with safe and efficient ways to be there, accommodate potentially new forms of transportation, facilitate safe automobile traffic, and enhance the vitality of downtown. So those were the goals of the corridor study that were established in the transportation plan. And one thing we want to hear about tonight is there something missing? Do we need to add to that? Oh, wait, and now Cindy will do a little bit of history.
Okay. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Beth. And I will try to talk a little slower. And hopefully, if nothing else, this will be a little bit of an entertainment, a little bit of education, and then we'll really dive into hearing from you. So a brief history. Again, there's lots of history that's not represented on this slide. But of course, you know your city was founded in 1818, and our streets really provided this function to move all modes. And they moved pretty freely on our streets. People walking, people biking, horses, everything was happening in the same space and going in different directions. In 1907, College and Walnut were paved. One thing that's kind of an interesting fact is that streets were paved to allow for better bicycling movement. The good bicycling movement is really what initiated our paved roads. Of course, that had benefits to other modes, such as horse carriages and, of course, automobiles. In 1956, the state actually ordered your streets to become one-way on College and Walnut. This was something that the community actually was against at that time. Or some of the community was. There was a long process by which there was initially an approval by the city council, and then that was rescinded because of public sentiment. So they went through a process at that time. So you're going through another process to think through what this corridor can evolve, how it can evolve for your community. It became a little bit more vehicle-centric. It was about ingress and egress, which means getting into town and getting out of town. It was really a highway mentality to developing the one-way system that we see in a lot of communities, actually. And now we're looking at that. We don't have a prescribed idea of what's going to happen, but how can we maybe balance and think about how our streets can provide a few different functions. As Beth mentioned, I just want to nest this within the recent planning efforts. Of course, you have a comprehensive plan, which was adopted by council in 2018. And then you, of course, had the corridor study was identified in the transportation plan, again, adopted in 2019. Both plans were based on a lot of input and had specific goals, like Beth mentioned. I want to mention a few more here. You know, in the comprehensive plan, you talk about maintaining historic character, supporting local businesses, promoting walking, biking, and public transit, thinking about some sustainability items for downtown. Also in the transportation plan is about creating options, really, for your system in your downtown. And now we need more specific input, of course, from you. So some of the things we wanted to mention in terms of our observations as we've been here, some of this is going to be qualitative, some of it quantitative. Of course, you know both streets are 2 to 3 lane one-way configurations at this time. The average daily traffic volume varies between 7,500 to 17,500. It depends on where you are in the corridor. And different curbside uses happen in different areas. Parking, of course, is present in some areas. There's bike lanes in some space. There's sidewalks and certainly cafe space as well. And of course, Bloomington Transit operates on the corridor at what we call 30 to 60-minute frequencies as well. So let's talk a little bit about the volumes. This has come up today, even in conversation. I just want to mention a little bit about this. So again, the average daily traffic volumes is 7,500 to 17,500 on the streets. That's based on 2022 numbers. And I want to share with you this graphic. It's hard to see, but what you really need to focus on is this is 1976 volumes indicated on the right. And what you see in red, highlighted in red, is actually a decrease in volumes between 1976 and now. So we've seen a decrease in the volumes. And you can see in the green is showing the increase, very marginal increases, less than 1%. So the corridor has decreased in volume, actually, but actually, interestingly, at the same time, your population in Bloomington has increased. So there's some interesting things going on there in terms of how people are navigating the city, maybe how they're getting around in terms of different ways throughout the city. So just something, a really important thing to note and keep in mind. I want to share a little bit about daily trips in the area. So on the left-hand side of the screen is how people are getting into and going to the corridor. You can see in the middle, of course, most are driving alone. So we know vehicles are still going to be important to this corridor, as well as walking. A lot of people are walking. This is a really high percentage of people walking on your downtown streets and accessing the area by walking. And of course, there's carpooling and other things going on as well. Oftentimes, we say that people will tend to choose the different modes if they have the right type of provision or if they have the right type of comfortable facility for them to be able to walk, to bike. So you might see some shifts in this depending on the type of design treatment that we think about. On the right-hand side, you see some census data showing how people are commuting to work, again, in the study area. Most are driving alone, but you see a lot working from home, of course, thanks to COVID. That's changed how we work, and certainly, again, a high percentage of people walking to the downtown area as well. In terms of safety, on the left, you'll see some data points that I want to share, and then on the right are some of our photos that we took from yesterday and our observations. About 150 crashes along the length of the project each year. That's a high number when we work in communities all across the country, and that's really high. Speeds are exceeding the speed limit and repeat crash locations. So you probably have experienced this. People stop at red lights and they go really fast to get to the next right, and then they pause again. So thinking about those speeds is really important. In terms of crashes, in the last 5 years of data, 40 serious injury crashes, and that lists all the different types of crashes, and 4 were fatal. So again, high numbers that we really want to be thinking about when we think about street design and what can we do to make it safer for everyone. Accessibility, this is about people, how can people navigate who might depend on walking as a mode that they need to walk. They don't have a car, they don't have a bike, but that's their option is to walk. And also people who have to use mobility devices, so anyone with sort of accessibility challenges to navigating. So it's an inaccessible network, and that's what you see in some areas. So you can see sidewalks don't have curb cuts in this instance going across a driveway. So getting from one side of the driveway to the other could be really hard for someone who's in a wheelchair. And then, of course, it's an incomplete network at some places. On the previous slide, you saw some of us walking along a grass area. Same here, lack of presence of sidewalk in some areas that we want to think about in terms of a consistent facility. Other aspects of accessibility, how are people getting into businesses? Is that an accessible route? Are there other things that we could do for other people who want to access businesses, but maybe come by a different mode, say biking, creating what we call end-of-trips facilities or bike parking areas, really important for people to feel like they can use the area. In terms of your public spaces, you have some really fun things going on in the city of Bloomington, and certainly along the corridor, we saw some great things. You have some challenging areas, situations as well. As I mentioned before, sometimes a lack of sidewalks, narrow, it feels narrow, it's hard to walk in groups or with a person next to you. There's things about, some of the sidewalks, there's tripping hazards in some locations as well, so thinking about how can we freshen that up as well. So there's lots of opportunities we see to increase the economic vitality and better support adjacent land uses. Again, trying to advance some goals that you have in your planning documents. Embody the identity of Bloomington. What do you want Bloomington to be known as when people arrive into your community? Think creatively about things we want to incorporate into the streets, either more permanently or flexibly. You have some parklet things that are going on in different areas. Should those be maybe thought of as more temporary or more permanent solutions? And this is a great opportunity in terms of this study to really evaluate the use of the public space in a way that reflects, again, your community values. We're going to ask you a lot about that tonight. Of course, you tell us how it works, how the observation of your public space. These are just a couple of typical cross-sections. We call these cross-sections. I'm not going to, of course, it varies throughout the corridor. What we're looking at right now is College between 6th to Kirkwood, and you can see just about 90 feet in terms of a right-of-way, so that's the space from building face to building face, and what's happening here and how the road is configured. So travel lanes, 3 in each direction, parking, angled on one side, parallel on the other, generous sidewalks actually, generally but some of that's used for cafe spill-out space, so the actual space for people to walk feels sometimes a little bit more narrow. As you can note up on the upper right-hand corner, some of the percentages, so 70% of our roadway is dedicated to vehicle space, 29 to roadway to pedestrian, and no space is really dedicated right now to cyclists or transit in this particular location on the cross-section. on the street. Walnut, very similar in terms of its percentages. Again, 0 dedicated to cycling and transit, about 72% of the roadway dedicated to motor vehicles and 28% to pedestrian space. So just give you a sense of kind of existing conditions. We did a whole existing conditions report, and that I didn't want to go into too much detail because we want to really hear from you. But I'm going to share with you a little bit what we call foods for thought, or some things to think about as before we dive into community conversations. Our streets originally, a traditional conception of streets was that they were balanced. What I just want to call out here is whether it's so a local street is something you access to your residence. That's called a local street. A collector is another designation, and then arterial streets within the roadway classification. And generally, it was balanced between access, which is about accessing your destinations, and throughput. Throughput is about moving through the space. So it was a very balanced way on all of our streets. The conventional conception, and when I say conventional, that means when the automobile became more of the central way of navigating our cities, it changed. It really changed. We saw much more throughput happening on our arterials, and then to our collectors, and then of course local. And this was really a shift in our mentality, and it's created the system that we have right now, which is pretty motor vehicle focused in a lot of communities. And if you just do the squint test, I'm not going to dwell too much time on here, but you can kind of see where your arterials are. This is just some X-rays. We call these X-rays, or aerial views of different communities throughout the U.S. Some examples of where the arterials are. And I just wanted to share, here's Bloomington, and you can kind of, if you squint, you can see where the arterials are. And the interesting thing for Bloomington is they go right through the heart of downtown. So thinking about that in terms of what that then does to your downtown, you can see sort of the College and Walnut configuration there. So again, just a reminder, just a slide, going back to that slide, just to show that it was a really balanced approach at one point. And this is what streets looked like at that time. They were a place of social and economic exchange. You had a lot of different modes happening on our streets. And people, it was very vibrant, activation on the edges as well. And people, of course, streetcars, motor vehicles, is kind of all happening. There was a balance of that. And as we move to more of this mentality, this is what that same street looks like. So if you look at that blue arrow, that was, if you saw it in the previous slides, that's that same location. And while there is provision for walking, it feels a little bit more auto-centric. It feels it's dominated by the cars that are moving through here. So just a change in mentality I wanted to mention. That same place, that's Richmond, Virginia, also had a really fantastic transit system in their downtown area. In 1949, they said goodbye to their transit system. And in 2020, they replaced their transit system. So this is their BRT. So they're going back through a rethinking of their streets and what they need to function. This street is incredibly activated. This is about 6 a.m. in the morning 2 weeks ago when I was there. So it's not super active at this point in time, but really well-loved transit line that they now have put back. This is that same street as where the transit was taken out before. Another community, I'm going to ask you at the end of this if you know where this is, but another place that we've worked, we were asked to come in and look at the downtown street system. This was a community with lots of a whole one-way system in their downtown. And we did very much what we're doing here, which is convene community conversations, and people felt had different sentiment, whether the streets become two-way streets or stay one-way streets. But we convened conversations, and we really listened to the community, came up with different options, and this was our overall plan. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but you can see we thought about all of the streets as a system. When you think about your street system and returning one-way to two-way restoration, you need to think about some of the implications of that street restoration. So this is what we designed, and this is the before. You can see not dissimilar to Bloomington in terms of the number of lanes, and this is what it looks like today. And so we worked on some different options at that time, and the community was very interested in looking in two-way restoration and repurposing some of that space to places for people to walk and bike safely and feel good, comfortable, and also safe in the community. We've seen incredible reinvestment in this community to the tune of over $1 billion of new investment has come into the downtown. Again, another shot of that same street. So you'll see the high-rise building on the right of this image. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact same location, but you can see that same building is on the left-hand side. And this, in this instance, again, repurposing some of that space to people walking and biking. And it's really created a lot of investment in the community. This is one of the intersections that we looked at and came up with a design solution. Again, not too much different than what you have at the south end, where Walnut and College come together. Came up with a concept to think through a roundabout configuration. So again, we could do the two-way restoration, and that's what they built. Been very successful for that community. Anyone know where that was? That's right. Yep. I'm going to talk a little bit now about some things just to, again, I want you to, it's food for thought. It's things to get ideas and juices flowing as we jump into conversations with you. So the purpose of our cities originally was to really advance this idea of efficient and effective exchange. Efficient meaning minimal use of resources, so land, energy, and time. The transportation was really, to minimize that long distance travel. We wanted people to access their destinations pretty darn quickly, pretty darn easily. And the land use purpose, again, was to concentrate the components of civic life. So it was all about social and economic exchange. That's why we have cities. And now we're starting to think about, that's the foundation, and we've created a conventional approach to a lot of our street systems now, and a lot of communities are going through what you are right now and studying. Do we want to keep that conventional thoughts or focus, or is there some different options we could be thinking about? So how do you turn that conventionally designed spaces into great places? This is an example of how you might do that on an arterial area street, which is thinking about those edges and making them more comfortable for people walking or biking and repurposing some of that street. In a main street, in a downtown, it's about maybe high-touch materials, creating cohesive landscape or furnishing palettes, so it feels like a place you really want to linger and stay in a downtown. You have some of that going on here, and it's about thinking about how we can incorporate that in some of College and Walnut as well. Another example of just bringing some really lush green experience into a downtown location. So it's about centering people's experiences, thinking about design principles, which we'll talk about in a minute. We're listening to you to hear about what are your priorities for this community. And also, what are your community values? Do you want to think about preservation? Is it about correcting some things? Is it about creating new things? Is it about retaining some of the history of their culture? And that very well could be your one-way system, but it's a time to really reflect on that and what you want to do. And right now, it's about this process. So all of that's coming together right now in this process, and we want to hear from you. So thinking about design principles, we've talked a little bit about this in terms of the way arterials were created. Originally, busy streets should never be edges or divide a place. They were thought of as a whole, together. The road and the street and the place really functioned as a whole. They should be a street, great address where the place functions and the path functions really work in harmony. And this can be achieved in several ways. These diagrams on the right-hand side show how it was originally thought of in terms of our streets and our land use or our adjacent spaces really working together. When we created arterials, it really became split and divided. It's not the one side of the building or the side of the street to the other side of the street doesn't necessarily talk to each other. It's hard for that to feel like a comfortable whole of a place. And now a lot of communities are doing exactly what you're thinking about, is how do we calm that arterial? How do we make it back into a whole? There are different opportunities. We call this spreading car loads. So thinking about where the cars are in your downtown area. A couple different ways we can think about this. We can concentrate it all on one street, like you see in option A, and this is just showing kind of different configurations of a downtown network. You can have one-way pairs. That does happen in different communities. And then you can also think about splitting those loads, and you have the room on both College and Walnut to remove lanes, and if you wanted to do that, that is something that's definitely on the table. What you have is 17,500 at your max average daily traffic, and certainly can do one lane configurations there. So for safety, value, and walkability, the preference is the two-way configurations, most often followed by A, which is, again, just a couple of different options that you can think about for the downtown streets. And consider all users of the streets. Certainly vehicles, like I mentioned, are still an important part of that, as are people who want to walk, bike, who rely on transportation, non-motorized transportation, as their primary use of the street. So these are what we call mobile, people who are mobile. There's other uses of the street that happen. So schools, accessing schools, accessing residences, and different play and spaces. So those are more static spaces. And what we oftentimes talk about is designing for the people that are most vulnerable. And if we get that right, it feels more comfortable to all of the different modes that need to be here. This is a cartoon by my colleague, Ian Lockwood. He's a traffic engineer. And you have some things to think about. We can have a capacity of the street that really focuses on cars, or we can think about it in terms of balancing all the different modes and the experiences of the street. When we think about walkable and bikeable places, we talk about 7 different principles. And I'll run through these pretty darn quickly, but that they're comfortable, that people feel comfortable along the street, that they're engaging, there's things to look at, there's things to engage with, to sit down, to linger. That they're accessible, and again, by accessible, I mean that it allows for anyone with any sort of mobility impairment to navigate the streets. That they feel connected, that they truly are connected through their pass system, or the street, the sidewalk network is very connected. That they're convenient, that they access the destinations that you want to access, be that places of destination or even your transit system. That they feel legible, that's very intuitive in how to navigate your street, no matter what mode you're going along within your streets. And lastly, but most importantly, that they're safe, that there are provisions for all the modes that want to be on your streets, so we think about them in terms of safety. And one way to think about our streets, we've talked a lot about vehicle capacity, but we have shifted to more of a person capacity analysis, and this allows us to really look at and consider a broader range of modes and users of an urban street. So this graphic really shows you how many people can be in the street in their different locations. So in private motor vehicle, you can see about 600 to 1,600 an hour. But if you look at sidewalks, you can process in that same amount of time 8,000 to 9,000 people per hour. So one way we're going to be thinking about the street as well. And the last thing I want to leave with you before we go into conversation with you is this idea of path as place, that a path, a roadway, a street, a network of our streets, even a highway can be really thought of as and designed through its design and its composition. It can be part of a place, a defined location. It can become the identity for different communities. And it's not about making everything be place-oriented, but through our design treatments, how do you keep that space as memorable? How do you make it as memorable as it is the destinations to which they lead? So it's a path as place approach that we think will really be something to think about, even if it's still very one-way situation on your streets. We want to be thinking about how it functions as a place as well. And it's applicable to every context, from an urban core to a natural environment. Path as place is sort of approach to street design. So now it's really time to hear from you. That was a lot, but just hopefully some thoughts, some ideas to help you think about new ways of conceiving of the streets. And we're going to ask you 3 questions. We're going to ask you to come up to different tables. We'll ask you to kind of put yourself at different tables. We're not going to number off or anything. You go to a different table. There's 6 different options here, or 5. We have 5? Yeah, 5 different options. You can see them here. We have a map on each table. We'll turn that over and ask for you to provide feedback. And we're going to ask 3 questions. You can ask us questions, of course, and we can, the conversation is really free-flowing. But these are the 3 questions. What do you like and want to see retained? What do you dislike and want to see changed? And what's missing that you would like to see created? And we really want you to focus on what are the outcomes you want to achieve here? What are the things that you really want these streets to do for your community? And again, hearing from you is really important at this time. So, and then we'll go through a little report out. I'm going to leave these questions up there, and we're going to ask you to convene at these tables. Jazz, Melissa, and I will be filtering around to the different tables. We're not going to sit at each table, so you can have a conversation, but we are there to answer questions. And then we're going to ask each of your tables to report out. So think about who from your table is going to report out on your behalf. So we have about It's 6:40. We have about 30 minutes for this, a little bit more, and we'll convene and we'll do a report out for about 10 minutes toward the end. We'll give you a little warning in terms of the time, and then we'll talk about some next steps. Yeah.
Anything you needed there. You did not have the big box stores on the west side. You did not have the mall. Secondly, most people did not own cars, and many lived within walking distance. All of that no longer exists. What you're wanting to see up there is not going to change that. And another thing, safety. Bloomington has become a mecca for the walking dead. Essentially, they have taken over the parks. They make it so buses are not safe. And you will not get people into parks, and you will not get people on buses until you start seeing crime and criminals for what it is, and you clean up that situation. These cities you are showing, if you were to show Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado, you would not see crime. You would see a variety of stores, and you would see plenty of places to park, and you would see homes within walking distance that are owned by families. You would not see massive apartment complexes, and you would not have the student population. Many people we talked to refuse to go downtown because there's nowhere they want to go.
Yeah.
That does not solve that problem. Thinking that if you immediately change the design of your road, suddenly you're going to be able to walk into Bloomington and find anything.
You are right. There are other issues and confounding issues that happen.
Address that. I feel like I was a teacher for years. With many surveys did not address the real problem. And if you truly are a city of diversity, equity, and inclusion, safe streets are not safe streets. It's also my understanding that the reason delivery trucks are in the middle of the street is they can no longer use the alleys because they're no longer safe. Now, shouldn't we be addressing those issues before we spend millions of dollars recreating a city that has 4 seasons? And where do you put the snow? What do you do? I don't see where I can put any of those in those categories. I'm done. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Great. Well, let's go over to our tables. We will, again, give you a little bit of a warning for when we're going to kind of come back and report out. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you at the small group activities. All right, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, we're going to convene, come back together, and I'd love to hear. It's not. All right, we're going to come back together. I would love to hear from you. This sounds like it's not. Okay, there it is. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, we'd love to hear from you what the conversation was like around your table. So I'm going to start in the far back corner and we're going to call it table number 1. Can you share with us what the conversation, some of the conversation and the comments that you had? Wish I could bring one to you, but I can't.
Okay, so things that our group talked about that we really like is that there's a lot of small businesses that we're able to all use, lots of different grocery stores and shops. Things that we talked about disliking and we'd like to be changed is that there's a lot of people that drive really fast on College and Walnut, and that can really reduce access for people who are on bikes or walking. We had a father in the group talking about how he would really just like his son to be able to cross the road safely without having to worry about cars or different things like that. And then some of the things that are missing that we would like to see created, we had a lot of different people in our group talking about just the lack of safety for cyclists. And so developing some type of system for like protected bike lanes or whatever solution we would come up with to make it safer for cyclists and pedestrians. So yeah.
All right, the next table over there, table number 2, could you come on up and share? Thank you.
Hi. Isabel Piedmont Smith, and our group talked about, as far as what we like and want to maintain, the ease of driving. Most of the group liked the one-way pairs. Part of the reason was that you can get around the delivery trucks. Also liked the historic character of the older buildings and wanted to preserve that. What do you dislike? We talked about some of the abandoned or unused or underused spaces, especially south of 2nd Street. The lack of tree plots between Walnut and the sidewalk south of 1st Street. There was a particular bus stop on North Walnut in front of the Verve Apartments where the bus just stops in the lane and blocks the lane and decreases visibility there. And not enough space to park your bike and also have outdoor seating so that it seems too narrow for 2 people to walk down or anybody in a wheelchair to use that sidewalk when those things are present. What is missing that you would like to see created? So segue from the previous one, wider sidewalks. Use of street corners for performance spaces. That was an interesting idea. More places to sit. Safer separated bike lanes. And more trees or other greenery.
Thank you. All right, table 3.
Hi, my name's Evan Nix. So for our group, we liked the one-way streets as well. We thought that it was nice for crossing the street as a pedestrian. You only need to look one direction. We also really liked the square, both for what it is and then also just those types of spaces where you can be. There's green spaces, seating. Same with Miller Showers Park. And then the fact that it is the main, if not only, like thoroughfare or arterial road, so it handles a lot of the traffic. And then also the delivery systems and moving for students seem to be handled decently well and didn't cause too much of a problem, the current way that we handle that. As far as dislikes, unsafe traffic, a lot of people speeding, and then also through the traffic, there's noise, and it just makes a feeling of unbelonging or unsafety. Turning onto 7th with the bike lane is confusing and causes some challenges. I think we all had an example of seeing someone struggle with that. And then, yeah, the merging problem south of Kroger And then also we talked about the angled parking and how much of that cross-section that it takes up, and perhaps something else might be a better use of the space. As far as missing things that we'd like to see, ways to easily see pedestrians and bikes, perhaps like raised platforms from the walk-on or something like that. More places to be, to sit, or more parks, something like that. More intentionality in the aesthetics, especially like south of Seminary Park. Also kind of in that vein, like more public art, more trees. And then along the tree line, interest in like helping with the noise for traffic, helping with the heat island effect and things like that. Yeah, other ways to control speed, whether that's just more speed limit signs or speed bumps or more enforcement. And then also the sight lines with them just being two very long streets, like all you see is concrete for a while. So different things to kind of break up what you're looking at could be nice. And also more things to interact with, whether that's art or benches or things even more playful than that. Thanks.
Table 4.
I was our note taker, which makes me the report out person. I'm Matt Flaherty. We had Bridget, Sydney, Tim, Hopi, Dave, and Kate popped in momentarily. For likes, we did like loading zones where they exist, but noted that they were limited. Miller Showers Park, adjacent closure on Kirkwood, and wondered about between Kirkwood and College as an option during certain periods of time, the cross streets, Kirkwood and 6th. Let's see, the historical plaques, mostly on the B line, but noted that we liked those around town, noting the character and history of Bloomington. Bump outs with planters in them, outdoor dining and the diversity of businesses. Also, street parking as an option, especially at night for safety reasons. Dislikes included the sort of convention center land bank dead zone and the potential to redevelop in that area and have more trees. When business signs aren't visible, that was a dislike. Speeding and red light running, as well as the noise of cars accelerating when lights turn green. People driving the wrong way on one-way streets was noted as a dislike and a common experience, especially around student turnover time and visits. People blocking whole lanes of traffic for loading and unloading was a strong dislike. Some navigability challenges with one-way streets, in particular via bike or as a pedestrian. Let's see. Yep, loading trucks again, blocking the lanes. And then everybody being in a hurry. So what is missing and could be created? We had making sure we connect with the surrounding context. So there were mentions of Hopewell, also Beeline as a corridor, as well as some mentions of the cross streets. And they may need some calming or integration with any design changes of Walnut and College, for instance, on 3rd Street. Better utilization of Fountain Square Mall in interaction with the outdoor public realm was a desire. More businesses between 10th and 17th. Let's see. Narrower roadway designs to address speeding issues. Dedicated bike lanes and protected bike lanes came up multiple times. The interest in the scramble crossing, which is where everybody can cross in the same direction at once, or any direction at once for pedestrians. We have one at 10th and Fee right now, I believe, that kind of signal. Also, climate resilience built-in design, so more trees, looking to address urban heat island impacts in this with all the pavement, as well as extreme precipitation and flooding. And a desire for increased bus frequency and or dedicated bus lanes. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Last but not least, Group 5.
Hi, I'm Darius Smith, and I'm representing our last table here. We agree with a lot of the things that have already been said, things like protected bike paths, but we discussed the use of them and the Beeline Trail is a really good bike path for already a part of that section that you guys are talking about, but there are other sections that aren't as protected. So using the Beeline, maybe directing traffic, bike traffic to the Beeline would be good in some of those areas. Keeping accessibility for our elderly population, there was a discussion of that. We do have a lot of youth in Bloomington, but we also have a lot of elderly and retirees who are still part of the car culture, so parking is important to them as well. The entryway to Bloomington, the Showers Park area, I think they did a great job, but it's still, I think, underutilized and can be a much more of an inviting area when you come into Bloomington. So having that really be a showcase for Bloomington, and also making it more accessible for people to actually use it in certain ways. The loading, and they dislike the loading and unloading around the square. That's always a tough one. But people still want to be able to drive. And the one thing is that you do have the 3 lanes of traffic, and there's a possibility there for getting some of that space to be used for perhaps expanding sidewalks and things like that. So again, the bike lanes, the Beeline Trail was good. They want to avoid gridlock, so everybody really liked the one-way system. And again, the idea of the pedestrians only having to look one way for safety reasons was an important one. And more outdoor seating and restaurants, parklets. There we go. Oh, and just to reiterate everybody's calming traffic. That's what the biggest thing is people drive like idiots sometimes.
Well, thanks, everyone. Really helpful to hear how conversation went, and I think we hear some common themes around sort of how the streets work right now, how you want them to work, things around tree canopy potentially, or traffic calming. The one-way sounds like it's something that a lot of folks have support for. We've heard that from others today. Some, of course, some opposite views as well. So we have our work cut out for us, is what I would say, in terms of coming up with some options, which we will do this week. Again, they will just be starter ideas, but you have a lot of opportunity on these corridors to just think through some ideas. But again, that's what we're here to do. So we're again, June 13th at the public workshop. We have tomorrow, we'll have more stakeholder interviews. Again, open studios between 9 and 12 and 1 and 4. So come back in if you have something else you want to let us know. And invite your friends in as well. It's open and it's about having conversations. And then Thursday, we will have a public meeting, again at the same time, same place, 6 to 7:30. And we'd like to share with you some ideas and again, hear from you. So I just want to again reiterate sort of the process and some of the next steps. So again, we're still very early in this study process. So we'll be working through some concept alternatives after this workshop. We'll be evaluating those and taking a look at those, and then we'll draft the draft and final study. Multiple ways to stay engaged. Please take a look at the website. This meeting is recorded and will be available there, as well as some other information as well. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Beth.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I want to make sure you know about the project website and to sign up for email updates. So probably if you signed in today and shared your email with us, we will send you emails. If you didn't, you can go to bloomington.in.gov/college-and-walnut and sign up for email updates there. When you come back on Thursday, please, as a challenge, bring 3 to 5 friends with you. And we would love to see you. So I think Cindy did a great job walking through a lot of things here. I think it's challenging right now because we're talking about the space as it is and trying to talk about outcomes we want to see as a community. That will then get transferred into design ideas. It'll be a lot more interesting to folks once there are some design ideas, I promise that. But so this is still just a beginning phase of it to walk through those. And just in case, I think I want to address one concern I've heard. In the best way, Tool Design Group doesn't care what we choose as a community. So I know like they walk through options and they walk through designs and different design, how different designs usually result in different outcomes. But it's up to us as a community. They will work with us and design whatever streets we want. They're great at it. We appreciate it. But I think there are some concerns about that. So I just thought I'd share. They will do what we would like. Oh, the Thursday public meeting is different content than tonight. The Thursday public meeting will be the consultants taking in this input, taking in what they have heard about what people like and want to see the same, what people want to see different, what our goals are as a community, and presenting design ideas for our streets. So the Thursday meeting is different than this meeting tonight. It will also be streaming. I think Katz will do that again on Thursday, and we have a Zoom link as well. So there are multiple ways to take in this meeting, and we will always post the slides on the project website too. So if you have questions, I would think the best might just be to come chat now. Okay. Is it a big one? Oh, okay. No, like, No. So these are people who will design a street block tomorrow, yeah, so and then we reflect on those, and then there'll be a much longer process to arrive at an ultimate one. So there is no, here's the street design. We don't have that. This is all part of the charrette. You're in it now. We're charretting. Thank you. Have a great night.